In this section, we take a look at subliminals, and more importantly, how preconscious processing allows for their success. New technology might make them more powerful and might affect us even more so due to their being able to bypass conscious awareness. Knowing what is happening and how it influences people becomes even more important now that you, and people like or unlike you, can use them on social media. There has long been a public fascination with subliminals and their use in popular culture, as well as how they affect people and their perceptions without awareness. I certainly have been interested in subliminals for a very long time. Despite their presence in popular culture since the 1950s, since at least my undergraduate years in the 1980s, they were not seen as any effect at all by people in the scientific world. That does not mean that people weren't concerned about them. When I was growing up in Florida, I attended a fundamentalist Christian school that had a distinct fear of subliminals and their ability to control minds. Rock music, movies, television, even consumer goods such as Coca-Cola, Marlboro cigarettes, and pretty much every whiskey out there were carriers of the demon messages. Everywhere you went in my hometown of St. Petersburg, Florida, you would find Jack Chick cartoon booklets, like the one you see here, warning parents about the dangers of subliminals. As if puberty wasn't hard enough, Satanists were out to subvert the youth of America through fun things. Subliminals came in 3 different varieties: embeds, backmasking, and precognitive stimuli. Of these, only precognitive stimuli have scientific backing for their influence, of which there is quite a bit. Embeds occur when photographs or scenes in visual media are altered by inserting words, symbols, or pictures that are barely visible. Disney came under attack by certain Christian groups for embeds in some of their animated movies. In their movie The Little Mermaid, a wedding official becomes visually aroused, and there is at least one embed of what might be considered male genitalia in a building spire at the beginning of the movie. In the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a car accident spills Jessica Rabbit out of the vehicle, exposing her. And, as you may or may not see here, in The Lion King, a purported subliminal occurs after Simba reaches adolescence and before he reunites with his childhood girlfriend, Nala. Here, after he plops down, a cloud of dust rises above him, forming the letters S-E-X as the dust trails off. Backmasking, by inserting the audio of words backwards, has been around for a very long time in experimental music, but there isn't much research showing that it actually works. If backmasking worked, it would mean that we humans would have the ability to understand words being said backwards. In other words, we would have to have an automatic inborn knowledge of language, which we don't. We have the ability to learn language, and there are certain attributes of language that we share cross-culturally, but there are very many different languages that humans use. But that doesn't mean that people don't think that not only does backmasking exist, but that it actually works. And there have been lawsuits. Here, we see the heavy metal band Judas Priest was brought to trial for the subliminal of "Do It" in one of their songs. And of course, there has been pop culture commentary on it.
By the way, Nikki, check this out. What's Ozzy trying to say there?
John, absolutely nothing. The Blizzard always came straight with his messages. But wrap your minds around this, gentlemen. Oh, no. Chicago. I love this song.
I command you in the name of Lucifer to spread the blood of the innocent.
Oh my God, Chicago kick.
Subliminals have also been seen in politics. The main type we consider is that of precognitive stimuli. When we look at subliminals in politics, 3 questions need to be answered. First, do subliminals work? In other words, are they effective in altering attitudes? Second, was a subliminal message intentional? And third, what was the effect of the message, the subliminal prime? Perhaps the best example of a subliminal being used in politics was the Rats advertisement aired by the Republican National Committee in support of George W. Bush when he ran for president against Al Gore in 2000.
Under Clinton-Gore, prescription drug prices have skyrocketed and nothing's been done. George Bush has a plan. Add a prescription drug benefit to Medicare.
Every senior will have access to prescription drug benefits.
And Al Gore? Gore opposed bipartisan reform. He's pushing a big government plan that lets Washington bureaucrats interfere with what your doctors prescribe. The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide. The Bush prescription plan, seniors choose.
The first question one needs to ask is, do subliminal advertisements work? Maybe you saw the precognitive prime in the advertisement because you were ready for it. But back in the day of VHS tapes, very few people thought that anything was going on. Only one person, a retired Boeing engineer who thought he saw something and looked at the advertisement frame by frame, actually saw something. And this is what he saw. To test whether this frame had any influence, I ran an experiment on Election Day 2000 to consider the effectiveness of the Rats precognitive stimulus that's seen here. I did it ostensibly to compare Medicare policy advertisements from Al Gore's and George W. Bush's campaigns. From Arkansas State University were randomly assigned to view the Rats commercial with the Rats frame either still present or removed. In other words, I removed one single frame from a 30-second advertisement. The findings from this experiment suggest that the Rats stimulus led to higher approval of the Republicans' Medicare program, diminished trust in the Democrats compared to the Republicans, and led to less likelihood of people saying they would vote for Al Gore. The stimulus accounted for 9 to 13% of the variance in these three equations, which is an impressive finding for a stimulus that appeared for only 1/30th of a second. In other words, one frame out of 900. The second question is, was this subliminal message intentional? Now, a degree of plausible deniability may be asserted due to carelessness and ignorance. The producer, Alex Castellanos, claimed that the advertisement used a visual drumbeat of jump edits, also known as jump cuts, a technique in which visual images are presented discontinuously to draw attention to bureaucrats decide, and, by implication, the other term, interfere with doctors. This seems valid in light of cursory analysis of modern advertising techniques. Jump edits and other techniques that speed up and slow down scenes to draw attention to the product are commonplace. However, the placement of the term rats in its series of jump edits, where it probably would not be noticed but would be processed precognitively, raises questions concerning intent. Therefore, seeing is believing, and what we saw in the previous slide suggests some intentionality. Because there are two series of jump edits in this ad, we can compare them. The first series, Interfere with Doctors, what we see here, lasts for approximately 16 frames from start to finish, or a little more than half a second. In comparison, the Rats/Bureaucrats Decide sequence lasts for only 9 frames, or less than 1/3 of a second. Analysis of the Interfere with Doctor sequence finds little to suggest that any part of this ad was carelessly designed. The third question concerns what is the real-world effect of the subliminal or the precognitive prime? This is a little bit more difficult to answer because the real world is very complex. What we do know is that the 2000 presidential election was exceptionally close, with final results in doubt long after the final vote was cast. Al Gore garnered over 500,000 more votes than George W. Bush, but George W. Bush won the Electoral College by 271 to 266 votes, chiefly by prevailing in Florida. Analysis of market coverage suggests that the Rats commercial was seen in 17 states and 72 markets, reaching 32.5 million viewers. Many of these states were battleground states and have identified as such, and these turned out to be key in the outcome of the election. Of 5 of these states, they were decided by a percentage point or less, with Iowa, New Mexico, Oregon, and Wisconsin going for Gore. However, the 5th and highly populous state of Florida, with its 25 electoral votes, provided Bush's decisive margin. The controversial finish, with a razor-thin margin of victory, opened speculation as to the effects of subtle factors on the outcome, whether it was the butterfly ballots, hand versus machine counting of ballots, state versus federal Supreme Court jurisdiction, or subliminal advertisements. The final word when we think about subliminals is trust your instincts, especially if they tell you to look closer. Antonio Damasio in 1994 ran an experiment with his colleagues, and he had subjects choose between 4 decks of playing cards, one which had very high wins but very high losses, the other with smaller wins but much smaller losses. Using skin galvanic response as the dependent variable, in other words, the measure of the sweat on skin, he found that subjects started getting very high response when they chose from the high gain, high loss decks. These subjects then started avoiding these decks. Interestingly, the comparison group of those with lesions in their prefrontal cortex did not learn and did not change their strategy, pointing out the importance of gut feelings and the ability to recognize them in making decisions. So, what we do know is that very subtle stimuli, even things we aren't normally paying attention to, play a big role in how we lead our lives. That includes politics. And in a world where our politics is mediated by video, that in turn may be affected by others with potentially nefarious goals, paying attention to your emotional response may be that which helps you survive and thrive.